That night in that cell, I told Jesus, I said, hey man, I'm calling you by name. If you are for real, you need to come down here and fix this. And if you can fix this, I'll get on the team. It wasn't fix my sentence. It wasn't fix the judge. It was fix me, because I just couldn't stand to be in my own skin anymore. I could not believe the violent, it was like playing reels in my mind of, riding my bike and playing baseball and all the things I did as a kid. And I was like, I couldn't even recognize the person I'd become. But the difference when I said my little session that night, talking to the creator of the universe and all the other times I complained for my problems, was I got on my knees that night in that cell. And I humbled myself probably for the first time in my life. He showed up and I never looked back.
Welcome to the Follow Forward podcast, where we highlight real stories, global voices, and Christ-centered servant leadership. I'm your host, Tim, and today I'm joined by Paul Del Favero in Orlando, Florida. Welcome, Paul, to the show. It's great episode. How are things in Orlando today?
The weather is absolutely stunning. I remember you told me the last time you were here visiting that you didn't have air conditioning. Still haven't wrapped my mind around that, Tim, but it's about 70 degrees out today, bright, clear skies, beautiful breeze, just really the kind of weather everyone comes to Florida for, that lasts about 4 months out of the year.
Yes, I have friends now in the States. I know they head to those warmer climates. We've got friends in Ohio, and the snow has already hit there. So yeah, we know there are those swallows that are heading down Orlando way. Yeah, and I've visited you. I've been in your home. What I like to do in these stories is, this is stories about my friends. These are people I'm in relationship with. This is not a podcast of strangers trying to get the amazing stories out there. What we want to do is talk about real life, real things that are happening on the ground. And Paul, I remember actually how we met. Oh, there you go. I was going to mention the dogs. They're making their appearance. Your dogs are special. I must say that they're very special. I've
There's
stayed
something.
a couple of times, and yeah, they're still a bit suspicious of me, but we're trying.
Yeah, one is.
Paul, I remember that we met almost by chance in one sense. It's one of those God moments where I met with your pastor, Pastor Joe Creech. We had a very short meeting. I think I'd arrived late in Orlando, and he had a very small amount of time. We had breakfast, and when I shared with him a little bit about what I was doing and why I was in Orlando and the fact that we're involved in prison work, he just said, I've got to talk to you. And I sent you a message and you got straight back to me. And what was remarkable about that is I've been trying to connect with some other prison ministries in Orlando. I was there for a conference and various things and struggling to get meetings in the diary, but you were right back at me. We met at, I think, your favorite burger joint. And I was just greatly impacted by your story, by your humility and what you're doing in mission ministry. And actually in the 2 years since I've met you and seeing what God's doing, I know that, you're kind of an all-in kind of guy. And so what God's doing is remarkable. But I think, what I want to hear is some of the backstory. Paul, you're not just someone who ministers to prisons and ex-offenders and previously incarcerated people. You have walked that road yourself. So Paul, what was life like growing up for you?
I grew up in sunny South Florida. I was originally born in New York City. My family moved me to South Florida when I was like 2. I actually remember part of that car trip. Isn't that weird? Remember being down there and, attending school and playing a lot of sports when I was a kid. I guess around age 12 or 13, a couple things went a little sideways with my folks. They got split up, got divorced. My mom had some mental health issues, and things kind of quickly unwound from there. I remember I was 12 or so years old, and I remember finding some weed that my mom had in the house and trying to smoke some of that. And by age 13, crack cocaine had just hit the streets in the early 80s, and nobody really knew what it was. And man, South Florida turned into like a war zone when that stuff hit the streets. And I got caught up in it. And the first crack cocaine I ever saw, my dad gave me to sell in school, God bless him. He was trying to pair me for life with the streets, or whatever his intention was behind it. It probably wasn't in Dr. Spock's parenting guide, but he was he was doing the best he could. But things started to slowly unravel on me from there, started smoking drugs and experimenting with cocaine. And I remember one day just kind of crossing that line from where I could get high and do some coke, whatever, and put it up and go to sleep and call it a day, to one day I woke up and I just had to have it. I don't know
Right.
when the day was or when it was that I crossed that line, but I went from being somebody who was a user to an addict, and things unwound on me quickly. And then I spent a lot of time in juvenile detention centers and, like boot camp militant, behavioral modification places. And we used to call the detention centers back there gladiator school. So I was going to all those places until about age 18. And then I was incarcerated in juvenile stuff from like age 15 when I started injecting drugs to age 18 where I hit the big leagues. And then I had a really dark period for about 2 years from
Mm.
18 to 20. I don't really see a need to talk about any of that because you're either going to think I'm a sociopath or a liar. So I just say I did a lot of work for the enemy during those 2 years and found myself in Broward County courtroom and locked up in their county jail, and my with no offer, no plea bargain, and the only thing that they came at me with was 120 years in Florida State Prison as a habitual felony offender was the only offer they were coming at me with. So I went from that, and
Oh, so you're 20 years old now, or
20 years old at this point. Yeah,
20 years old, and you're facing life.
120 years. Yeah. Yep.
Right. And so in your mind space then, how did you actually manage that? How did you actually, I mean, I think that's the hard thing.
Before they came at me with that time, I was in that jail cell and I was having another one of my cussing out God moments. And I had no one to blame but myself, but of course I'm gonna blame God for, like, how can you be this loving, caring, compassionate God and let my life get to this point? And I'm sitting there in this jail cell, facing forever, no bond, can't get out, strung out of drugs. I remember I was so fried I couldn't even read. I remember I
Mhm.
tried to read something when I was in there and I was so cooked from the drugs I couldn't even read. In my dope fiendy ways of cussing out God and blaming him for everything and calling him every name I could think of, for whatever reason, somewhere I heard the name Jesus. I don't know where, how, or what. I was never a churchgoer, never was grew up in the faith, never really read the word, nothing. But that night in that cell, I told Jesus, I said, "Hey man, I'm calling you by name. If you are for real, you need to come down here and fix this. And if you can fix this, I'll get on the team." And it wasn't fix my sentence, it wasn't fix the judge. It was fix me because I just couldn't stand to be in my own skin anymore. I could not believe the violent, drug addicted animal I had become. Like, I didn't even recognize myself, Tim.
Mhm.
I was like playing reels in my mind of, riding my bike and playing baseball and all the things I did as a kid. And I was like, I couldn't even recognize the person I'd become. But the difference when I said my little session that night, talking to the creator of the universe and all the other times I blamed him for my problems, was I got on my knees that night in that cell and I humbled myself probably for the first time in my life. He showed up and I never looked back, you know.
Right.
But I still ended up going to prison. It wasn't like I got a get out of jail free card because I said a prayer. I still ended up going to prison for 25 years, but it was better than 120.
But how did your journey with him grow from there? Were there people that could come alongside you? What was your discipleship environment like in prison for yourself?
If you want me to tell you that I went to the chapel and went to all the church services and hung out, I didn't do any of that. I literally read the book every day.
So
I just
so you
read the
knew the
Bible.
Bible, you got stuck in.
I just kept reading it, Tim.
Mhm.
And I went on a fact finding mission for a while where I read almost 5,000 novels while I was locked up.
Mhm.
And I read from the Quran to the Kabbalah to the Egyptian Book of the Dead, Nietzsche, Frost, Yeats. I mean, I read it all, you know what I mean? You know, and nothing read like the Bible. And the book that really solidified my belief and everything was a book called Fox's Book of Martyrs,
Mhm.
Foxees.
Yeah.
And it talks about what happened to the apostles after Jesus ascended. And when I read that, I was like, it was one of the hardest books I've ever read, not only because of the language, but just reading what happened to these people. All they had to do was recant. All
Yeah.
they had to do was say it was a lie, that Jesus wasn't a real thing, and they could have walked. And the way
Right.
that they were murdered with when I read that, I went, okay, no one is going out like that over make believe.
Mm.
They
Yeah.
saw something. And then, when I got back into my word, started reading the Bible more, man, it became clearer and clearer and clearer to me. And it just took time for me to, like I would say, it took my first 10 years in prison to develop a conscience, to have any kind of remorse for things I had done. Up to then, I would just chalk everything up to the game. Like, well, I was in the game. That's what you do. You know what I mean? But like over a period of time, I was like, man, like, I hurt people. I hurt my family. I hurt myself. If I would have died, where would I have gone? If I hadn't have talked to Jesus that day, like if I had died back and then, what would my eternity have looked like? So these are things I started to think about. And God, talks about a renewing of the mind. It talks about being reborn. Like that happened for me. And it's still a work in progress, trust me, but it took a solid 10 years for me to even start really showing any fruits of the spirit of reading that book.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I love about that, the realness, the thing about the Christian faith is it's not a one-time fix, is it? Romans 12, verse 1 and 2. I mean, it's a passage I've been reflecting on a lot recently. It says, "Be transformed by the renewing of your mind." It says, actually, don't conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And both of those things are daily decisions, daily ongoing processes that will continue for the whole of our lives. It's a daily decision not to conform to the patterns, not to conform to the patterns of our old way of thinking, not to conform to the patterns of our old actions. But it's equally then a daily decision to follow Jesus in such a way that we will be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And it almost sounds like you had to do that. It's almost like a spiritual detox you had to go through for 10 years in order to really allow that process to become transformative in how you viewed yourself. Is that fair to say?
Man, I'm still trying to die daily to myself, Tim. Like I'm still doing the same things 30 something years later that I did when I first got into the word, man. I didn't try to rewrite the formula or do anything different. I still read my book every day. I still read the word every day. I still ask God to help me, not blow this every day. And like everybody, I'm convinced nobody really knows what they're doing. Like if someone said they knew what they were doing, I'd question them. I don't know what I'm doing, Tim. I just show up every day and just try to ask God to give me the wisdom to handle whatever's put in front of me. You know, my walk was, different. I guess, like I said, I had no upbringing in the church. I had no anything. It was just a name I heard, and I asked him to come fix it, man. And he chose me. I didn't choose him. Something prompted my spirit. Something prompted me to do that because I was not on that, Tim. I know that God had a plan, a purpose for me, and I don't know why He chose me, but I'm thankful He did. Thankful being the least statement I could say. I'm in awe of my life, Tim. I really am. I wake up every day here at my house, and I sit in my back room and I have my cup of coffee and I read my scripture. My little dogs crawl up on my lap, and I think back to the years in prison, and I think back to the years on the streets, and the things I did, and the person I used to be. And my life is like surreal to me. Like this
Mm,
doesn't even seem like a real thing, man. But the further I get into this, the older I get, the more I keep talking to Jesus, the more broken I understand I am, and the more I just keep giving credit to Him. Tim, everything about my life, I'm playing on house money. Like I shouldn't be here, Tim. I shouldn't be doing anything I'm doing, but yet God chose me and had a plan, a purpose, and He put the right people in the component. You being one of them, He put the right people in the components of my life to be able to serve His kingdom. Me as a person, I can't make a difference in anybody's life, but God can. But He needs me to make myself available for that to happen. And that's pretty much our philosophy here. And I got out of prison, and I didn't know where to go or what to do. And I would, and don't take this wrong, I would talk to the church people when they come in sometimes. And like the Jesus they were explaining to me seemed a lot different from the one I was reading in this book. I'm just gonna call that. Like I didn't understand a lot. Even hearing about this rapture thing and all this, I was so perplexed by so
Mm.
many different things I heard in church. And then I would just kind of go to the church people and would say, hey, I've been in here almost 20 years. I'm getting out. I got no job. I got nowhere to live. I learned some carpentry in here when I was in prison, taught myself because I read Jesus Carpenter and I figured that was a good spot to go. Paul was a tent maker. I didn't see many people making tents, so I decided to go to carpentry. But the church people's response to everything, Tim, was that they'll pray for me. And I was like, like I get that, but where am I gonna live? Where am I gonna work? Like how
So
does
maybe
somebody
to
with
explain, because obviously, I've worked in the South, as you know, the South African prison system. We do that as message, and the US system is different. But you've been now 25 years inside. Did you finish your sentence, or did you come out on probation? Or how
I
does that
got some
work?
early release. I served 18 and a half.
That stage, do the authorities send you out on your own? Is there any support given from a government or state perspective?
They give you a check for $100 and tell you
Hmm.
good luck.
Yeah. So you've been in prison from the age of 20 till almost 40.
Yeah.
You've had no life experience in terms of being able to care and look after for yourself.
I could
Um,
fight and run a gambling board.
yeah, exactly. So you had a career, but it wasn't a career that would,
But I was only about 50-50 in the fight, and I got beat up a lot too.
So yeah, so there's a couple of challenges here, can you? I mean, career guidance would struggle here. So yeah, but I mean, this is the reality, isn't it? And the more we incarcerate people around the world, the more this challenge is that the day you get out, what
Now,
should be. Sorry, go ahead.
no, no, don't get me wrong. After doing that much time, I got to tell you, prison's a good idea. Like I met a lot of people in prison that I hope never show up on my block. How's that? I
Right.
met some really scary people when I was in there. And who knows? I might have been one of those people one time too. I don't know. But so prison does serve a purpose. Like there is, like I'm a proponent of it, but I think there needs to be, you know, eh, I have a good friend of mine that's a Florida Supreme Court judge here, and like he made it very clear to me one day. I talked to his lawyer. He said, "Always got to remember that it is not a justice system; it's a judicial system."
Mm,
And I
mm,
was like, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. For me to get 25 years for property crimes, was a little that we could sit here and debate that for a while. But as far as prison goes, the majority of people in there are for addiction and mental health problems. There is a small percentage of some really, um, I don't know, I'm going to say out of tune individuals that, probably will never function well in society. And that's probably a good idea that they be separated after they've already murdered or raped or whatever they've done to get in there, right? But for the vast majority, like what is it? And here in the States, you got like 97% of the prison population is coming back to the streets. And our recidivism rate in this country is 76.6% over 5 years is our recidivism rate. And 24% of that recidivism happens in the first week.
yeah. Wow.
That's a crazy number.
Yeah.
Florida alone has over 100,000 people in the prison system. Just Florida alone. It's a third in the country behind California and Texas. So, from being in there and seeing the value, of the people behind the gate, because there's a lot of people in there that want to do something different, Tim. Like they want a different life. They're tired of prison. They're tired of their addiction. They're tired of being the people they were, like I was, and they're staring at the ceiling like I was, and they're trying to figure it out. And that was my inspiration for doing this. One, God pushing me to do it. The other part is like I have a heart for these men and women behind the gate. I wanted to set up an organization that would answer the questions that I had when I was in prison
Yeah.
and meet the
Yeah.
need that I needed when I was in prison. And that's what we set up to do. My first year out, I had to pay $10,000 in restitution my first year out.
Really.
My parole officer said she was going to send me back to prison. I was making $11 an hour and riding the bus 7 hours a day. It was the middle of the recession. It was 2010. There was no jobs and no money. And these people told me I had to pay $10,000 my first year out.
Mm.
I
So
paid
that's
it.
Yeah, but the reality is that this is setting people up for failure. Is it?
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
the job of this conversation is not to put right the wrongs of the prison systems and everything. What we're trying to do is highlight the very real challenges that people that the most of society point fingers at and kind of said, well, they've they've reaped what they sowed, and those sorts of things. But the reality is, for people who have served their time, you know, many times disproportionately, and we can argue that and we can say, but often, because of their environment, because of the context, because of drugs, because of those things, and surely the judiciary system, the success rate should be based upon rehabilitation and reintegration, rather than whether we've kept people alive while they're in prison, or whatever metric we're going to use. But I think all we're trying to do is highlight this is a real challenge, and it's not, and I feel this is a gospel challenge, and South Africa, the prison systems, different parts of Africa we go into, we're learning what those prison systems are like, and it's chaotic. I mean, there are basically people locked up. If they don't have someone to provide food for them, they're not going to eat. There's all kinds of other challenges. Every country has this problem, but if we look at the human element and also the biblical instruction that we have to be involved in prisons, there's and that this is, setting the captives free is one of the metaphors of the kingdom of God. So I would say there's a gospel imperative for us to address this challenge, Paul, to say, what are if these are the barriers for people coming out of prison to be able to continue to walk their journey in Christ, then is there not a kingdom imperative for us to do whatever we can to break down those barriers, to create opportunities? And this needs to be something the churches can do a lot of easy stuff inside prison. And I say it's easy, my boss, Andy Hawthorne, says you can get salvations like shelling peas in prison because people know they're sinners. And often, just putting your hand up is seems like the right thing to do. But when the rubber hits the road is when they get out, what's going to happen at that point? And I would say that this is something we need to raise the agenda of amongst the Christian population, amongst churches, amongst communities, in order to say, wow, if we can begin to have an impact there, then this is going to bring great glory to God. This is something that can be wonderful. And so,
Yes.
I kind of sense your experience has been redeemed because of the kind of character that you are. But not everyone is Paul Del Favero, who comes out with that inner motivation now to serve God and to do the right thing.
But I'm going to tell you, Tim, people who are incarcerated, people who come out of addiction, people who come from this cut of cloth, this DNA, are natural born winners, Tim.
Mm.
For some reason, we get labeled as just like a lot of people go in prison with the message of Jesus, and they're telling everybody in there like how hard this is going to be and how broken they are and what it is. Like everyone's a sinner. We're all falling short of the glory of God. But I'm telling you, people with the DNA like I have, and the people who have gone out and committed crimes that went against the grain, that did things like I did back in the day, man, we were the people discovering that new country. We were the people getting on that ship. We were the people leading that charge. Like, we have a natural leadership mentality, and I telling you, the reason I think the prisons are full of people with this cut of cloth is that we're not there's no mediocrity here. I think we either run, Fortune 100 companies, or we end up in the graveyards and prisons. And I can tell you one thing, the enemy has doubled down on people with our DNA because he wants us dead, Tim, because he damn sure don't want us over here serving the kingdom. I mean, look at the DNA of the apostles. Look at these. They weren't like little meek. They were all roughneck guys. They were all fishermen. Jesus wasn't some, like, they have really demasculated Jesus in the churches, man. Like, Jesus was a about it guy. Like, he was in people's business. He was going where he wasn't supposed to go. Like, this guy wasn't squeamish. He wasn't a coward. He wasn't some, like, soft dude. Like, I feel like he was a very authoritarian, figure. Yeah, he had a peaceful, graceful, loving side, but I think overall he had a very commanding presence when you read the word. But you're right, Tim. Like, not everyone's going to heed the call. I mean, think about when Jesus went and did the Sermon on the Mount. He brought his apostles with him, 12 apostles. He performed miracles in front of 5,000 people, gave the greatest sermon ever told, pretty much answers all of life's questions in the Sermon on the Mount. And when he left with 12 apostles. You know what I mean? Not everyone came and suited up. You know, they might have went home, thought about it, whatever. So, you know, we can't control any change. We can't make anybody do anything. But what we can do is start trying to change a perspective, start trying to change this narrative that people coming out of prison or people in prison are useless. I think it's the exact opposite. You know, I think you have a bunch of people with spectacular DNA that have leadership ability that can be outstanding members not only in our community, but man, absolute soldiers for the gospel.
Yeah.
And we owe it to them to give them a place to start, to give them an opportunity to get on that path and let that, because I didn't get anywhere by myself. I'll tell you that. You know,
Mm.
people help me, Tim.
Yeah. Yeah.
People help me, man.
Yeah. Uh, Paul, I mean, I think you say it so well and so real. And I was going to say that exact word, perspective, the stigma. And I think that's really what we see. There's when as soon as we stigmatize people, we other them. And actually the call of Christ is not to stand on the other one side othering people. The call of Christ is to go and be with. And in being with, it's journeying, isn't it? It's not just a case of some platitudes and some prayers and some bits and pieces. It's actually that long journey. It's that long road that can actually lead to some disappointment and failure and mess ups along the way. But we got to keep on coming back and picking up and pulling our socks up and starting over again. And I also like what you're saying. We talk about this a lot in our prisons work here. We run this company called Gangstar Cafe. We do Gangstar coffees and we do that kind of thing. What the whole idea there is to say we want to provide a language that actually equalizes us. So I often say we all were in the gang. All of us were part of a gang that didn't know Jesus. We all needed to be rescued by him. We were all deserving of the same fate. And my issues might be different from someone else's issues. My sin might manifest different from someone else's sin, but it's all the same root cause. All the same root is that we're just worthy of destruction. There's nothing good can come out of us outside of Christ. So we're all part of a gang. So something needs to happen to break the stronghold of that gang so that we can fulfill that destiny in Christ, that we should shine like stars in the universe and make the difference, not because of anything special innately within us, but because that Jesus chooses to work in and through us. So we've got to change the language, change the narrative, and we as Christians need to be the ones waving that banner high. And I think what I love about you, Paul, and so many of the guys that work here is you've got the qualifications. You've walked the walk. You're not talking the talk. You're walking the walk as an example for others to follow that can help change the narrative, help change the perspective, and begin to inspire faith for what is possible, both for those who are coming from prison, that there's faith for them to believe that there is a future and a hope for them, there is possibilities, but also for the church and for the Christian community that's sometimes isolated and more influenced by the narrative of the media than we'd ever like to admit, that we need to get voices into those spaces saying, actually, this is something of a kingdom mandate upon us. It's not always the
Very
glamorous,
clear. Yeah,
but
it's
it's the
very clear.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's not those people, it's us. We're all people, man. We're all on this planet together.
yeah,
You know, we did our yearly event last week. We had over 300 people come out to support us at
amazing.
our event. It was amazing. The Florida Department of Corrections came and hosted a reentry simulator where people get to play the role of somebody getting out of incarceration, which I thought it was going to be really stupid when I first did it, and it was fabulously done. And it's really impactful. Really brought a lot of awareness to our local community here. You know, as far as our organization, we went from trying to have some, teaching some classes and talking about Jesus, and I wasn't really sure how this was going to look. God gave me a picture of it, and I didn't know what was going to fill in the blanks. But we went from doing 20,000 first year in donation and raising money to get going. This year we're on pace. I think our book says of last week we're at 370,000 this year. And we went from no homes to we have 11 homes now. We're opening a 12th December 1st. We're housing over 50 men, women, and children right now, and we're bringing the message of Jesus behind the gate to 5 institutions. I think we're we're averaging about 600 people a year coming through our doors here as an organization. And I don't know how many hundreds of others we're at least telling the story of Jesus to in the process of it. And I've had the privilege of working with the Muslim community, which I've really enjoyed getting to talk to them about some Jesus, and I've enjoyed engaging the LGBT community. I've really had a good time talking to them, and and this has been an unbelievable journey, and I'm just excited about what the future's got ahead for us, Tim. And it's been amazing to see what God's doing, and we're really promoting the entrepreneurial spirit here. We've had 4 people now open up companies and are doing well and employing other people getting out. And our little company now, as of today, we're employing 8 people that we say work with us, not for us. And we're just getting bigger as the days go and expanding. And all credit to God, man. I don't have nothing to do with this. I just show Tim. I don't have any idea what I'm doing. I just show up every day
Telling me that
and
every time I've met with you. But Paul, the Penitent Thief is your organization. People can go on your website and see it. The stories are remarkable, and your incredible wife, Stacy, is with you in this ministry. Paul, you're the real deal, and it's been great forming a friendship. I'm inspired by you, and I trust that as people have watched follow forward, that this can be something that inspires and encourages them, and in some way brings onto people's radar something that maybe they don't choose to think about that much. And God could stir up people to support, or even if it just means the conversations people are having are different. Because I don't know about you, I'm tired to death of the bad news stories. We've got to start sharing those stories of redemption, those stories of hope, those stories of transformation. And imperfect as they may be, they still point into a savior. The same savior that met you in that cell, all those years ago. Although you would just be another statistic. But he's the one who's done this, and we give him all the
let me
glory.
close with this, Tim. Let me close with this. When we were here speaking the last time, I asked you with all your years of experience, obviously Jesus being at the pinnacle of what we're doing, but I said, if you could pick one thing, Tim, that you couldn't do without in your ministry, with working with people coming out of incarceration, what would it be? And you said mentorship. And our message is this past, I told everyone at this event, I said, yeah, we need a check. All right. Yeah, sure. We need money. We're a nonprofit. Every nonprofit needs money. I get that. I said, what I really need is people in this community taking time for people in our organization, whether that's a cup of coffee, whether that's exchanging a phone number, whether that's sponsoring an event where we go, take people out bowling or have a picnic, whatever it is we do. Because I can tell you when I got out, some of the people in my local church that took an interest in me and invited me to their homes and broke bread with me and had a meal with me and treated me like a human being after coming out of incarceration. That's what gave me the energy. That's how Jesus worked through my community to keep me from making that stupid decision, to keep me from giving up, to keep me from being what the word says, a fool returning to his own folly, like a dog returns to his vomit. Like this community here through the church that I met, man, is what gave me the wherewithal and the sense of purpose to not make that bad decision when I was having a bad day. And I gave a challenge to the 300 people in that room this past week. Yeah, we need a check, but I'm more importantly, need y'all to show up for these individuals. And it's fine you're shaking hands and saying hi at church every Sunday. How about you come get your hands a little dirty and come get involved with somebody on a personal level? That's where it happens. That's where it happens, Tim. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where Jesus showed up. Jesus didn't sit in the temple and pray for people. Jesus went out and met people where they were at, man, and got involved in their lives and went everywhere where he wasn't supposed to go, Tim.
Mm, mm. Sure. Thanks,
So,
Paul. Amazing. Well, I thank you for sharing your heart with us. I really hoped. I mean, this is the kind of conversation you and I have over coffee in your house with your dogs barking around our ankles. It's so nice to put it there. I think it's important for other people to share in these conversations, and this is part of the reason for the podcast. The whole thing around mentoring. When we live this safe, small life, we just stay in our little bubble, and we never get a kingdom perspective. When we take that step out of the comfort zone, that's when everything changes. So I
yeah.
trust, pray that those 300 at your dinner, that they'll be stepping forward not only with their big checks, but also with their ongoing and practical involvement, and also, as we've been talking about cross-continental partnership and supporting one another in whatever ways. You're very generous with us in how you're partnering with us here as we're developing in Africa. But I think this shared learning, this shared opportunities, I don't know where that's going to go, but God's in it somehow. And if at the very least we get to kind of chew the fat together and what does the Bible say? Sharpen one another, then that's not such a bad thing, is it?
I don't know. I think God's got a bigger plan, Tim.
Yeah.
I'm not in this to do little league stuff. I want to do some heavy lifting for the kingdom. God knows I was doing plenty of lifting for the enemy, Tim. Praying God can just keep kicking doors and let's keep doing what we're doing.
Brilliant. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for being part of the Follow Forward podcast. Thanks for everyone for tuning in, watching today's story. Again, it's about real stories, global perspective, Christ-centered servant leadership. This has been Tim with the Follow Forward podcast. Please join us again in the future.
God bless.
Thank you for listening to the Follow Forward podcast. This may have been my idea, but I worked with an awesome team to make it come to life. Thank you to Lucy for guest management, scheduling, and being a real gap filler. Jordan for taking over the guest management baton, as well as doing content production, scripting assistance, and editing of these podcasts. Alistair and my lovely wife, Christina, for technical production, and Taryn for taking behind-the-scenes content and crew support. Whether you're watching or listening, make sure to hit that subscribe button on whichever platform you are on and share this episode with your friends so we can inspire even more people together. We release a new episode every Thursday, along with extra content to help you grow as a leader of people and a follower of Christ. Follow my Facebook page at Dr. Tim Tucker to access all the bonus content. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to send a DM or leave a comment letting us know what you enjoyed about the episode. God bless, and we'll see you next week.